Welcome. This is Ian Watson speaking together with,
Rachel Singleton.
and we're connecting through the wonders of Zoom. And we're going to record this conversation, which will be the first in a series of conversations around the general theme and topic of healing, the process of healing, what healing is and isn't, how it unfolds for people, and what we've learned about this through our own work in the healing field for many years. And also what its relevance is to practitioners, people who are working in the healing arts, in the healing fields, what we can learn from each other as practitioners. We thought it'd be a nice starting point of our conversation to just explore a little bit what we've come to understand healing is and what we've seen and learned about that. I know that my background was starting off with flower essences and homeopathy, herbal medicine, then moving into emotional and psychological healing. Yours, Rachel, you want to say a little bit about?
Yeah, so for me, homeopathy and flower essences, and then circling through over the years, the emotional and spiritual aspects and the body, how very often people focus on one area, so they might work with body therapy or something like that, and then maybe not work so much with the mind and consciousness, or someone might really work with a kind of counseling based therapy and not work so much with the body. And one of the things I've been certainly finding through my journey is that the more that I integrate various different ways of accessing flow and well-being, then the more it seems to fit together.
Yeah. So there's something about already that about the healing is a multifaceted, multidimensional, dynamic. It's not a thing. It's not a one-off thing, and it's we're not just talking about someone having, let's say, a physical ailment and having that disappear. That might be a part of a person's healing journey, but it's by no means it's not the beginning and the end of it, is it?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. I increasingly, I think of healing as a journey that is taking us to a new shore. And it's an invitation to look at what isn't working, to look at what isn't flowing, and to, rather than run away from that or suppress that symptom, shut it down with a paracetamol or whatever it might be, to kind of lean into that, to go in, to explore, to soften around that, to meet it, and see where that journey takes us. And I think there's a real sense in which healing is about being more whole, being more wholly who we are, being more fully who we are.
Yeah, and that's actually is the root of the term, isn't it? It's got I think it's a Germanic root, Heilen or something like that, which has to do with wholeness. And there's an implication there that there's a wholeness that can be restored through some kind of a process of uncovering, discovering, and in some sense recovering things that seem to have been lost. But there's also, I think, there's a movement or a direction or some kind of growth also is implied in when we use the term a healing journey. There's the sense that it's going somewhere, it's meaningful, there's evolution or growth in it.
Yeah, very much so. And I guess when we can resist that process, can't we? we can want to get away from the discomfort of that lack of well-being or illness or the symptoms or the emotions that are coming up. Often there's a real initial reaction that's a pulling away from that.
Yeah, I just want this to go away.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. And even when people come to a holistic practitioner, they're often looking for a holistic way to
Yeah.
get rid of a symptom.
Yeah, I'd like a drug-free way to make this
Yeah.
disappear.
Yeah. Which is really interesting. You know, it's kind of part of the medical system that many of us have grown up with. You know, the way that we've been taught to look at our body and to look at what comes up through us. If it feels edgy or uncomfortable or dangerous or inconvenient, then yeah, we want to get rid of that.
So what does that say about our kind of understanding, like our collective understanding about what's happening when we suffer, when we experience discomfort or pain? What do you think that says about the way that we kind of view that generally?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it implies that there's a fear there. You know, where we've got resistance, then we've got fear.
Yeah.
That we're trying to not let that happen.
Yeah, that's it. It's also the idea that this is something that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah,
Something's going awry here that ought not to be.
Yeah.
And yet, I think you and I have both come to see that that's only one of several ways that we can look at that same manifestation. So let's call that level one.
Yeah.
Level one of understanding is something's going wrong with my body. I just want it to be okay again. And you hear people say that, I just want to get back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like the approach.
Yeah.
When someone's got a symptom or an ailment and it's been bothering them, it's almost like it's just interfering with my life.
Yeah.
And people will say it's stopping me doing what I want to do.
Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with recognizing that. You know, that in itself is not a problem. What you do with that awareness that something is out of balance is the next step, though, isn't it? It's like, do we go into a place of restraining, restricting, repressing that process and trying to make it go away? Or do we go into a process of trying to heal and resolve and come through that? And if we do go through that, then as with any cycle or any kind of rite of passage, which essentially any illness is, then we end up in a different place from where we started.
So in order to do that what you describe it, undergoing something and ending up in a different place, something in our attitude has got to shift, doesn't it? We've got to be at least we've got to be open to the possibility that there might be something in it.
Yeah.
Other than it's just a nuisance.
Yeah.
So we could say that is part of the healing process already. When a person opens to that realization. I mean, I've certainly seen that. I've seen that with people that I've worked with over the years, where it kind of dawned on them that either that this wasn't just going to go away, and something shifted when they came to accept that, or there was a realization that, oh, there's more to this than I thought.
Yeah.
Actually, there's even a wisdom in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's interesting, isn't it? When a person suddenly sees that, oh, the fact that this thing has been stopping me doing what I've thought I needed to be doing, maybe is not altogether bad.
And that is a lovely moment. There's something really beautiful about that. That in itself is so healing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like suddenly to go from seeing something as threatening and as other to seeing that as wisdom, seeing that as possibility, seeing that as what needs to happen next, where my attention needs to go next, what's actually pulling me back to myself and to my truth.
Yeah.
Because we get those signs of imbalance, we get those symptoms as symptomatic of something being out of balance. And we feel greater well-being when we're in balance. So the symptom isn't the problem. The symptom is showing us something we need to see that was maybe just in a blind spot, that we maybe hadn't quite realized was going on, a way that we're coming out of balance in some way.
Yeah. And it's interesting because because we're kind of dynamic beings, and we are in some sense, we're on a journey anyway, right? We're on a life journey, and it seems to me that there's a requirement for ongoing growth, and a deepening of our understanding. And so,
I like that. Yeah.
if you accept that that might be so, then to me, it's not coincidental then that certain things arise at certain moments in our life, and that things that actually might have been perfectly suitable for us and healthy for us at one stage in our life, at a different stage, it seems like we outgrow them. So that which was, we could get away with treating our body a certain way, or living in a certain environment or whatever was actually fine. Then at a certain point, we start to feel the edges of it, and it's not fine anymore. There's a requirement for us to move on in some sense.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it wasn't a conscious choice. These were ways of being that we developed maybe when we were younger and in a situation where we're vulnerable, where we had to learn to adapt, to be, to live, to think, to believe in a certain way in order to stay safe. And then as we grow in comfort and empowerment and safety in our lives, and as we mature, then we start to question what we've always been doing, how we've always pleased people, how we've always accommodated things, how we've always made ourselves available even if we haven't felt like we want to be, whatever it might be. That sense of suddenly looking at our behavior, our way of living our life, and thinking, yeah, this doesn't fit me anymore. And being able to see where that's come from, and being able to sort of see that doesn't tally with, it doesn't resonate with who I am now.
So there's something quite fluid about this process as well, isn't there? It's seeing what's true in this point in time in my life now, and it's something that, in that respect, is very personal to each of us. We can't just look at what someone else is doing and say, oh well, I'll just follow them necessarily, and have it work. Have it work well. It might be working brilliantly for them, but it's often the case that people follow a diet, or something that they see someone else doing, exercise routine or whatever it is, and it doesn't quite do it for them in the same way. So there's also this aspect to it of really learning to listen in to what is it that's being communicated to you through the vehicle of the body, through the journey of maybe getting sick and then finding a way back to health. It does require us to listen to ourselves, it seems to me, in a way that we might not have been open to doing before.
Yeah. And there's something, I always think of it as exquisite and impeccable feedback that we get throughout our body being, not just in our body, but our whole being. And it's instantaneous. It will, you hear of people who will have, the most incredible, swift stress reactions in their body, whether it be through IBS or a skin flare-up or whatever it might be, asthma. There's so many ways in which the body can immediately show us something that we are not clearly seeing ourselves, that there's a level of discomfort and tension and imbalance and even incongruity, inauthenticity that's emerging, that we're not aware of because we're not quite settled right down in ourselves. We're not quite centered. We're not quite conscious of what we're doing or how we're being within the context that we're in at that time. And there's something about how very quickly and accurately and uncompromisingly our being will show us in some way when we're coming out of balance. And it's this dance of feeling for what's true for us, what's whole for us, what's ease for us. Does that make sense?
It does. And there's a suggestion in what you're saying there, which I think is true, that the body in some ways helping us to see and uncover what we would otherwise be blind to.
Mm.
So when we get that feedback in the form of discomfort, tension, pain, suffering of some kind, once we're open to learning, that's the key. Once we're open to learning, it turns out that, as you say, we're getting instantaneous, ongoing feedback every moment of our lives. Some of it's subtle, some of it less so. But it seems that the same intelligence is behind all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a living conversation with that, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's something about once we're willing to be the student rather than thinking that we're the expert, you know? There's something about allowing us to be informed by what's going on and to learn from it, which means that we've got to be willing to not know.
Yeah.
You know, when we start from a place where we think we know what's wrong, you know, or we go to some expert to tell us what's wrong, in a way that's often limiting as well, for the same reason. You know, they might give us a diagnosis, they might give us a prognosis, they might give us a treatment, but what have we really learned about, you know, about what's going on?
Yeah. And that is such a lovely, juicy truth, isn't it? That being in that place of not knowing is such a place of openness. And it's also just such a relief to the mind, because we think we have to think that solution into being. We think we have to work this out. But when we surrender to the journey, when we surrender to the process, when we surrender to the wisdom, when we surrender to the not knowing, then we become this openness, we become this spaciousness, we become this possibility, and energy can flow and things can move and things can shift and insights can come.
And then we kind of find our way with it, whatever that happens to be. And it's usually customized. You know, it's
absolutely tailor-made.
It's always tailor-made in that sense that it's literally being created as we go along from whatever occurs to us. And we get some kind of a sense that something might be requiring adjustment or change. Start acting on that and implementing change. It might occur to us to go to a different kind of treatment modality, a different practitioner, that maybe something we've not considered before. What I've seen is that can often be a significant junction point in the person's journey, where they suddenly open to having a certain kind of treatment that it was off, you know, it was just off their radar before.
Yeah.
And now they're willing to maybe consider it. And it's often we need to get desperate enough to let that possibility in. You know, I've exhausted the other options that I'm comfortable and familiar with. Maybe I'm willing to go in this direction now. I'm not sure, but maybe.
Yeah, and it's a sense that there's a block has been released there, isn't it? You know, there's a greater level of openness. The horizon has widened and broadened, and that person can look at this at a much bigger level. One of the things as well that I'm thinking as we're talking is, you know, it isn't all navel gazing. It's like we're talking about this dance, and we're talking about this sense of this constant ongoing feedback, but that doesn't mean we have to be scrutinizing our body and our mind and our emotions all the time. It isn't that. It's not a state of tension and fear and hypochondria. It's a state of easeful awareness. It's a state of trust, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it can sound like, you know, that what's required is to really go into some kind of a analytical mode, which is the opposite, I think, of what we've both seen is helpful. For me, the process is much more one of, it's more to do with opening and listening in a way that we haven't listened before. And then in that space that's created, things naturally come to us.
Yeah.
And it's things that we might not have even considered before. So there's no way that we would have come to them by reasoning it,
Yeah, absolutely.
by churning it over in our mind. Because when we're in that mode, we're using the thinking that we already know.
Mm.
And so the options tend to be limited to the ones that we already know.
Mm.
We're just not going to consider anything that's outside that. But when we let that kind of settle down and quiet, and we open to a bigger field of possibility, other things can then occur to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's often those little clues initially that are the beginnings of something opening.
Yeah.
Shifting,
Yeah.
something a bit more fundamental.
Yeah. And it's implied in the word, that one of the words that we used early on, which is journey. A journey is usually into the unknown, isn't it? It's that sense of expanding your horizons, moving out into something that's strange and unexplored.
Yeah, at least for you as that individual at that time, it's someone else may have been there, but
yeah,
for you, it's new territory, and in that sense, it has both an edge of excitement and possibility, but it also has an edge of maybe danger and
yeah,
I don't know what I'm going to find there.
yeah.
And that's often the reason we don't go there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we're afraid of what the implications might be.
And where it might take us and what we might find out. And for me, one of the words that always anchors me to healing, you spoke about opening, and I think of softening. So I think of that sense of when we're in resistance, when we're in fear, then we tend to tense, we tend to contract, constrict, which actually blocks flow, it blocks energy, it blocks ease. So for me, one of the words that helps me really come back to and to come out of thinking and overthinking is the word softening, and that sense that I'm surrendering, that I'm letting myself see the areas where I'm tense and I'm resistant, and just gently easing my way down behind that, through that, back to myself, and just feeling it as something that isn't threatening.
I like that. Yeah. That softening, it's like it's the opposite of the holding on and the constriction, which is often an understandably initial response to,
but we don't want to get stuck there.
Yeah, we don't want to get stuck there. That's it. But it's something about recognizing again that the fact that it feels uncomfortable when we tense up is helpful. That's telling us don't stay there. Don't get comfortable here.
Yeah,
because it's in a way it's that holding is not what's required now. There's a softening and there's a letting go that's required.
I think we get a really tangible sense of that when we go for some kind of body work. So whether it's like massage or acupuncture or or Bowen technique or whatever it might be, and when we're lying there and somebody's working with our body, and at some point it filters through to us that there's an area that we've been completely holding in tension, and that actually for things to flow and for that area to work better again, we're going to need to release that. We need to soften. And perhaps the therapist does something, whether it's, you go to an osteopath or something like that, and they click you around a bit and suddenly that all flows better again, or whether it's something that you do internally by just relaxing and switching off muscles that are too tense and too hard. And it's the same in our consciousness, that we get those knots and we get those hard, tense areas where we're circling around and around the same problem. And again, when we can open and when we can soften, then we realize that's what we've been doing. We realize that's what we've got stuck in, and we remember to just ease our way back to center, to ease our way back to a place of not knowing and of being open to what unfolds next, of being open to the wisdom and the possibility of it, of seeing where it's going to lead us, because it's course correcting us. It's actually offering us ourself back to ourselves,
Mm.
which is beautiful, exciting, thrilling.
And it turns out that in that relaxation and that sense of ease that we can rediscover, that's like the optimum conditions for physical healing to happen as well. I mean, we know that now through medical research that's been done, is that when we are in a state of chronic mental stress and tension, it actually creates a lot of stress hormones in the body.
Yeah.
It reduces the immune response. It reduces the self-healing capacity that we have. But the reverse is also true. That whenever we can relax and trust and soften and open, then again our body kind of naturally remembers what it knows to do. We don't have to get involved in that because it knows how to self-repair. It knows how to generate new cells to replace the old ones, and it knows where to send the antibodies when there's infection. It knows all. This is in. But there's something about that in order for that built-in intelligence to work at its best, it requires our cooperation.
Yeah.
Not in an interfering way. It doesn't require us to get involved and to mess with that system, but it requires us to at least not add to the burden. When there's healing that needs to take place, often what we do in terms of getting very afraid and very anxious and very stressed within ourselves, that's adding to the burden for a system that's already burdened.
Yeah, it's actually blocking the process, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like we shut down into fear and we tighten around the problem.
Yeah.
It's like the net gets tighter, whilst actually it's almost counterintuitive. But what we need to do is relax and let go and trust.
Yeah.
And view it with openness and curiosity and trust what life has given us next as this way back to ourselves more deeply. And again, I think we've both seen many, many times over that when someone gets that, then so much of their suffering and their resistance just falls away. Now they can actually get on with healing because they can see that it's asking for their ease and their relaxation in order for that to unfold. And so they're in this much more comfortable and enjoyable place within, where they can see that there's something really worthwhile unfolding here, something really worthwhile going. It's not just an inconvenience. It's not just something that's taken them out of their life and what they wanted to do and how they thought things should be. It's something that's giving them pause and giving them space to reconsider and really go within and feel what's right for me now. What am I doing here? Where am I going? Where does this lead?
What am I not doing that I need to be doing?
Yeah.
It can be that too.
Yeah.
So let's draw this one to a conclusion. And we're going to have subsequent conversations where we're going to talk maybe about some of the more specific aspects and facets of the healing journey that we've both seen and experienced for ourselves and seen in our work. And also we're going to have conversations around what it means from the practitioner side of the equation and also from the client side of the equation, how we can best engage with healing and how we can best serve the people if we're in a healing or helping role for other people. What is it that's really helpful, and what, how we can get in the way of that sometimes as practitioners unwittingly. And I think we can also have some exploration around if we're the ones seeking healing, how can we best engage with that? that journey, with that process.
Mm, mm. And that whole sense of kind of evolution and growth and consciousness and where this might take us and what this might mean for us.
Yeah, so that kind of background assumption, I think, will pervade all of our conversations, because we both share that as a starting point, that the journey of healing is in itself, it's meaningful and it's purposeful. There's value in it, and it's really worth becoming alert to that if you haven't already. And there's some way in which you can align yourself with what seems to want to happen,
and understand and notice the signs when that is happening, because you referred to the fact before that healing doesn't always involve a physical symptom or physically getting well. That isn't always or the only way in which increased well-being can manifest. So one of the things that we'll also explore is, what are the other signs of deep well-being returning? What does that feel like? What does that look like? How do we know when that's happening? If, for example, a physical condition itself isn't apparently shifting, what else might indicate to us that well-being is returning?
Yeah, because for us, I think our context for healing is much broader than whether symptoms disappear or whether they don't. Because, as you say, that's not anything that's we can force to happen. Certainly not on our schedule. But there is a way that we can learn to engage and connect and to realign with our well-being, even when that's not happening yet on a physical level.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful, I think, for people to know that they can still tap into their own self-healing capacity right in the midst of some kind of physical ailment. I've seen it happen right in the midst of a process who's approaching death.
Yeah, me too. I was just about to say that, and I think for client and therapist alike, it's really, it's reassuring and recentering to see that death isn't a failure, that illness itself isn't a failure, but that is part of the richness of what's going on at this time.
Yeah. So, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Ian.
Introductory conversation. We hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we enjoy exploring these things together. And we'll let you know when the next episode comes out.